A warm welcome to you from SGT University. Today we have with us Dr. Banashri Das. Dr. Banashri Das is professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, SGT University. She was earlier working at Safdarjung Hospital and Vardhaman Mahavir Medical College. Her field of interest includes infertility, vaginal reconstructive surgery and high risk obstetrics. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Bindu.
Ma'am, will you please throw light on what is eclampsia and why all should be aware of this dreaded complication of pregnancy?
You know, the eclampsia is a specific disorder or a complications of preeclampsia, which is a specific disorder to pregnancy. And this is, by definition, it is the clonic tonic convulsions and coma in a patients of preeclampsia, which is not attributable to any other cause other than pregnancy. And it is we have to differentiate it with definitely from the epilepsy or any convulsions due to intracranial tumor or meningitis. And in eclamptic fit there are 4 stages. In the first stage, which is called premonitory stage, in that usually it starts with the flickering or the twisting of the facial muscle, followed by the rolling of the eyes, or eyes might be fixed to one side, which is followed by the tonic stage. In tonic stage, patient's whole body muscle goes into spasm, which starts in the face, and when the facial muscles contract, you know, there is opening of the jaws and even the tongue comes out, and because there is contraction of the respiratory muscle, that lead to the arrest of respiration. That means the whole body muscle goes into contraction. That stage lasts for about 30 to 50 seconds. Followed by that, suddenly the patient's whole body goes into clonic stage, means in the suddenly the facial muscle, I mean the whole the jaw might be going into violent opening and closing, and also because of that there might be injury to the tongue, and also patient has got labored respiration, there will be secretions in the whole respiratory tract. These stages may last for even 1 to 4 minutes, and after that patient passes into coma. This coma might be a short duration, or after that patient will come out of this coma and she might be still confused. But sometimes in the severe cases, this coma may, end of the coma may, there she might get another fits or another convulsion might start. Okay? And it is a very it is a very devastating disorder. This word eclampsia is a Greek word which means the flash of lightning. This is called so, it jeopardizes the life of a pregnant, apparently well pregnant woman. It jeopardizes her life, not only jeopardizes her life but also the life of an inborn child within a minute. And it can lead to such a conditions that patient might even die of this condition. You can compare this condition something like a road traffic accident with an head injury. If you don't give treatment immediately, the patient will die. Because of this, actually in whole world, especially in the developing countries, maternal mortality due to eclampsia is very high. In India, incidence varies between 1.2 to 1.8% of eclampsia, and there are, as you know, the India is a vast country with variable healthcare facilities and also the different socio-cultural practices. So, incidence of this eclampsia also varies from place to place. Some places it is reported to be 1 in 30 pregnancy, whereas in some other places it has been reported to be 1 in 500. About 6 to 19% of these patients die in India. Maternal mortality rate is about 6 to 19%, and perinatal mortality is still very high. It ranges between 30 to 50%. In developed countries, incidence is not so high, like it is normally reported to be 0 to 1.8% only, but perinatal mortality is still high in those countries also. Even from US, it has been reported to be incidence to be about 5.6% perinatal mortality, whereas UK recent reports say the perinatal mortality is to be around like 11.8%. So, as you know, I mean, this is still a devastating condition, still people are dying. So, I feel that all the healthcare provider, I am not talking about only the obstetrician and gynecologist, but all healthcare provider should be aware of this condition, so that when a patient brought to their facility, they should be able to give adequate prompt management to this patient, so we can save a lot of lives.
Ma'am, you have told us that eclampsia is responsible for maternal mortality in nearly a third of the cases in India. Will you tell us why some women develop eclampsia and how we can prevent eclampsia?
Okay, see, etiology of eclampsia is not known or not clear yet, but there are various theories, like it might be immunological theory, that it might be because of the immunological intolerance between the maternal tissue and the fetoplacental tissue. As you know, the fetus is an allograft, or there might be because of the maladaptability of the maternal maladaptability to the normal changes of pregnancy, or it might be because of some genetic factors. But what we have understood till now is the pathophysiology. It has been observed that there is defective invasion of cytotrophoblast, invasion of spiral vessel by the cytotrophoblast. As you know, when the fertilization occurs and the embryo, it gets implanted into the uterine cavity, it normally burrows inside the musculature, uterine musculature, and it gets its blood supply from the uterine muscles, vessels. So, at that time, naturally normally there is invasion of cytotrophoblast, it invades the like vessels, walls are invaded by the cytotrophoblast, because of which the vessels become pliable and they are not normally responsive to all the vasopressure agents of the normal body. But in case of preeclampsia, this invasion of the cytotrophoblast does not happen, and because of that the vessels are very narrow, so that leads to the less circulation to the placenta. Because of this, so it leads to placental hypoxia, and when there is placental hypoxia, in reaction to that there is secretion of some inflammatory agents or inflammatory factors, interleukin 6 or fibronectin. So, because of that, you know, there is defect of the endothelial layer of the vessel, also that leads to the aggregation of the platelet inside the vessel. Also, it also happens that it also leads to the disruption of the balance in the angiogenic balance. You know, like there are some factors which causes, as you know, prostacyclin and thromboxane ratios should be balanced normally, but there is increase of thromboxane and less of prostacyclin, that leads to the vascular contraction. Okay, and all these also causes the endothelial cell damage, which leads to the leaky capillaries. So, because of these are the most important pathophysiology found in cases of preeclampsia. But as I told you, all these factors are releasing into the vasculature. So, not only releasing only to the placental vasculature, but it goes to the whole body circulation. So, that means it affects all the vessels of all the organs of the body, that which leads to it to be a multi-organ disorder. And because, as you know, it affects the brain, it affects the liver, it affects the kidney. So, all organs are involved in or gets affected by these factors, or these same pathophysiology happens in everywhere. So, if in case of brain, when there is vasoconstriction because of that leads to again cerebral hypoxia, and as I said that there is endothelial damage leading to leaky capillaries, that leads to the cerebral edema. So, this cerebral hypoxia and cerebral edema, that causes cerebral dysrhythmias, and that is the actually cause of this convulsion that occurs in cases of eclampsia. Now, coming to the prevention, to one, you know, like if prevention should be happen in different level. That means how can you prevent the eclampsia? If we can treat the pre-eclampsia properly, you can detect the pre-eclampsia properly, and then only you can prevent it. That should be happen in different level. Like first is education, which is like health education. We should be educating all the reproductive age women, especially expecting mothers, that they needs to go for repeated antenatal checkup. Besides, we should advise them regarding adequate food, high protein diet, etc. But they should be told that they need to go to the hospital repeatedly as and when they are called by their healthcare provider, and they should always listen to their advice. And so by that, if they go there, then only we will be able to pick up the disease. Okay? And also we should educate not the women only, but we should educate their close families, because their husband, their in-laws, they should know that this patient, that pregnant woman should go to the hospital, and in some cases probably even the community leaders and all. So after that, once the patient comes to any healthcare providers, any healthcare centers, then always we should look for to find out if there is any high risk factor in these women, because we know there are some high risk factors. If those patient has those factors, then probably they are more prone to develop preeclampsia. Those high risk factors are, as you know, like extremes of age, like less than 20 or age less than more than 40, or primigravida, or the people who already suffering from hypertension, kidney disease, diabetes, yes, medical disorder like diabetes, or she has got history of previous lupus erythematosus, or she is a case of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, or sometimes if it is an IVF conceived pregnancy. So those are the people who in multiple pregnancy, all are the condition who are more prone to develop preeclampsia. So when the patient comes, one should take a proper history to find out if this patient is likely to develop preeclampsia. Okay? And then when patient is coming to you, one should examine her thoroughly, take a proper history, ask her if she is having body swelling of her body, or if she thinks she is gaining weight, excessive gaining of the weight, or she is having any headache, and we definitely should always examine her blood pressure. We should look for urine for protein, and we should see her if she is gaining weight, excessive gain of the weight. And once we detect it by this is important, because you know, like blood pressure, albuminuria, you know that these are the sign of preeclampsia. So we can detect that this patient is going into to develop, or she is developing preeclampsia. Yeah. Now suppose you have got that the patient has developed preeclampsia. Suppose she has gone to a primary health center, or she has gone to a Anganwadi. So once they examined and they found that she is a preeclampsia, then it is better always to send this patient to a tertiary care center. At that time they should be advised properly. That is my third point, that advising is very important. They advise properly that they should go to a tertiary care center. That's why, because you know, like as you know, preeclampsia can deteriorate very fast. In the beginning it might be mild, but suddenly she might go into severe, preeclampsia with severe symptoms and can develop eclampsia. So she needs to be treated in a tertiary care center. If it is in a tertiary care center, one have detected that she has got preeclampsia, then we should follow the patient very closely. We should be able to advise her to get admitted, or and every day we should examine the patient properly, and because we need to see if the baby is mature or not. So till that time, if you are keeping the patient admitted, we should every day look for if she has got any sign of impending eclampsia. There are some sign of impending eclampsia, like a patient might complain of severe headache, because you know 80% of the patient who has constant headache, these are sign of impending eclampsia. They may throw a fit, or she might be complaining of blurring of vision, or she might be complaining of pain in the epigastrium. So if you find these symptoms, if we find these, then patient needs to be terminated. We need to terminate her pregnancy, because these are the signs that patient might throw a fit, and it will be difficult to treat at that stage. Always, because termination of pregnancy actually is the detreatment of this thing. So as I told you, education, early detection and proper advice and management of preeclampsia, if we do it properly, definitely we can prevent a lot of case of eclampsia.
We have learned that eclampsia is a multi-system disorder. So, what are the consequences of eclampsia?
Yes, as you know that this is a multi-system disorder, that means it affects all the organ. So, depending on that, just say when the patient throw a fit, she can have a tongue bite, okay, and because of this she might fall and get herself injured. But also because of the involvement of this organ, there can be cerebral hemorrhage, there can be hyperpyrexia, or the patient, if it involves the heart, there can be acute left ventricular failure, and because of the aspiration there can be aspiration pneumonia, or patient can go into pulmonary edema, or even there is adult respiratory syndrome. Kidney, because of the involvement of the kidney, usually eclampsia patient also goes into renal failure. Acute renal failure can happen. In the vascular system, there might be thrombocytopenia, or there might be even the patient can go into DIC. So, like all organs are getting affected, and this is not only the mother is getting affected, but it also affects the baby. So, there might be prematurity and all the consequences of prematurity. Prematurity might be iatrogenic, or it might be because the patient has gone into spontaneous labor because of the eclampsia. And also there might be fetal distress, and also there is a very high chance, as we have discussed, that there can be intrauterine death of the fetus because of severe hypoxia. So, these are, eclampsia, that is why actually lot of morbidity or mortality happen because of these consequences of eclampsia.
The effect of eclampsia varies from sudden onset blindness to mortality of both mother and the unborn child. What, in your opinion, is the best treatment modality of eclampsia?
Yes, the treatment of eclampsia, like it is a teamwork. Always you need a team for the management of eclampsia. First and foremost, management of eclampsia should happen in a tertiary care center where there is well equipped obstetric intensive care unit, and also there is a neonatal ICU, and there should be availability of the multi-system specialist, expert specialist, so that if the patient goes into multi-system disorder, then we might need the help of them. So, all these people should be there, and also when even in obstetric unit, there should be always ready with the facilities for the management of eclampsia. That means, I mean to say, actually they should have a special eclampsia kit, where all the medicine, all the other paraphernalia like IV cannula, catheter, intubations, equipments, all should be ready all the time, because that will save a lot of time in the starting of the treatment. There we do not have so much of time that we go and look for all these equipments or instrument or the drugs at that particular time. So, always there should be a ready package, which is we normally label as an eclampsia kit. And first and foremost, I think success of the treatment, eclampsia treatment, is depend upon the skill and speed and the prioritization of the treatment. Okay. So, when a patient is brought in eclampsia, the eclampsia patient comes to the hospital, immediately patient should be put in a HDU, and even if you do not have a HDU, it should be a well lit, well ventilated room with at least there should be a special bed with high railing, so that patient does not fall if she throws a fit. And also there are special tables are available where patient can be treated in that table, and when we want to terminate the pregnancy, we can take the delivery in the same table. We need other all the paraphernalia like infusion pumps, suction apparatus, intubations, all the facilities for intubation, everything should be there. And when a patient comes, first and foremost you put the patient in dorsal lithotomy position or in the lateral position, and also that is so that she does not aspirate all the infant. And if there is an obstruction, if there is any secretion in the mouth, then you have to suck after it. So, basically first thing is the ABC or the airway, breathing and circulation, you try to correct that one. So, and after that along with that all this everything should be actually together. Once you are doing that, then also you will put the put a cannula to take, because we need to put drugs. So, we should secure an IV cannula, and along with that you should take the samples for the blood examination, especially as you know we need CBC or the complete blood count, ABO-RH grouping, and we should arrange for blood cross matching because we might need blood. Then we send investigation for liver function test, kidney function test, blood sugar. And also suppose this patient has come for the first time, she does not have any antenatal investigation, then we might need to send other antenatal investigations like viral markers and all. And while this is going on, one person of the team should take a comprehensive history of the patient. History will be definitely here, we have to be taken from the relatives or the family member who is accompanying the patient. We have to find out about her obstetric history, whether she has shown somewhere before that, whether she was diagnosed with any disease or she has got any past history of eclampsia, and also if the normally patient comes with ultrasound report. So, you see whether there is a period of gestation, whether the patient is there any abnormality or whether everything was fine before that. So, and also very important, if the patient has gone to some other center and she has been referred from other center, then you find out if the patient has received any medication, because and also the time of medicine, the name of the medication, how much she has received. Normally actually one should send all this report along with the patient. So, because that will modify our management now, okay. And also along with that we will start her on anti-convulsion treatment, anti-hypertensive treatment, and once this is stabilized, then you do an obstetrical examination to see the viability of the baby, and also we can put a catheter at that time for urine output, and also we have to send urine for albumin, okay. And so all these things to be done together. Once of course patient is stabilized, then we go for the delivery of the patient, which is the ultimate treatment of this eclampsia. Now coming to the anticonvulsant, there are various, mostly magnesium sulfate is the D drug or the preferred drug for the as an anticonvulsant. There are various regimes by which magnesium sulfate is being introduced, like normally we use is a Pitchford regime, in which we give 14 grams of magnesium sulfate stat. Out of that 4 grams is given IV very slowly, normally use 20%, 20 ml magnesium sulfate should be given over a period of 3 to 5 minutes. Okay. And then you associate along with that, you give 5 grams of magnesium sulfate in each IM intramuscular injection in each buttock. So, total it becomes 5 gram plus 5 gram plus 4 grams, so total 14 grams, and that normally we repeat 5 grams intramuscularly, we repeat after every 4 hours in alternate buttock, and this should be continued till 24 hours after delivery or 24 hours after the last fit. But before giving the second injection or the repeat injection of magnesium sulfate, we should always look for any sign of magnesium toxicity, because magnesium sulfate, like its therapeutic dose and its toxic dose are very close. So, normal therapeutic dose is 4 to 7 milliequivalent per liter, whereas toxic dose start from 8 milliequivalent per liter, and like if it is between 8 milliequivalent to 10 milliequivalent per liter, first sign is there is loss of deep tendon reflex, which normally we examine in the knee as a knee jerk, and if it is more than 13 milliequivalent per liter, there will be respiratory depression. And if it is very high, like if it is more than 30 to 35, even the patient can go into a cardiac arrest. So, we should always look before giving the next injection, we should always look for knee jerk, and also we should look for the respiratory rate. Knee jerk should be present and respiratory rate should be more than 16. Okay. Also, we should always look for urine output, okay, because urine output, it is not a sign of toxicity, but as you know that magnesium sulfate is excreted in urine. So, if the urine output is less because of the involvement of the kidney, then there is very high chance the patient will toxic sign symptom will appear because of accumulation of it, magnesium sulfate. And another thing, one have to very clearly know that if there is sign of magnesium toxicity, then that antidote to magnesium sulfate is the calcium gluconate. That is the dose is 10 ml of 10% solution, that means 1 gram should be given over a very slowly over a period of 10 minutes. There are, of course, besides this picture regime, there are different regimes like Sibai regime, or there is a Dhaka regime. And in the Dhaka regime, actually this is specially for the Southeast Asian countries. This is similar to pictured, but here the dose has been reduced. Instead of 14 gram stat, here we are giving 10 gram stat. That means 4 gram IV in the beginning, along with the IM injection. Instead of 5 gram, here they are giving 3 grams in each buttock, 6 gram IM and 4 gram IV, that makes 10 gram, and that repeated dose is given as a 2.5 grams in each buttock instead of 5 gram what we are giving. Logic behind this Dhaka regime is that they said Southeast Asian countries women are body weight is definitely less than the European countries. So, because of that we need here the women need less dose, and that is because so that toxicity will be less with this regime, and result has been found to be similar with the pictured regimes. Then along with that I was talking about antihypertensive treatment. Antihypertensive, most preferred antihypertensive is the labetalol, which is given as 20 milligrams IV stat, and then you see for the blood pressure if there is if there is a change in blood pressure, and if we should examine it after 15 minutes, and if you find that blood pressure is not controlled, then you give another injections, can be given 40 mg in the next dose after 30 minutes. Next dose can be 80 mg after another 30 minutes. So, total dose is maximum dose you can give 300 milligrams per 24 hours. There are other drugs also like nifedipine. Nifedipine is a good drug, especially when you can't get a IV access line, then you can give nifedipine, which can, but it has to be given orally. And another problem with nifedipine is that it has got a synergistic effect with the magnesium sulfate. So, sometimes there is a sudden fall of blood pressure with that, that is why it is not preferred so much, but sometimes if you can't get an IV line, then even and BP is very high, then you better give a nifedipine can be given. Other drugs are hydrolazine, we do not use so much, but this is also a very good drug. Dose is around 5 milligrams stat, and then you repeat after 15 to 20 minutes. And another drug is, suppose it is not controlled with these drugs, then one can go to nitroglycerin drip. Nitroglycerin drips is if the patient is not getting control, then it is supposed to be a very good drug. You can give it 5 microgram per ml per minute, and then you can increase it every 5 minutes till you get a desired blood pressure. It should not be coming down more drastically. So, you should be level should be your aim should be like 150 by 100 or 90. And once the patient is controlled, I mean your BP has been controlled, this thing is convulsion is controlled, then normally we go for the termination of the pregnancy or the delivery. So, for the termination, one can allow the patient for going for the vaginal delivery. It is not an indication for cesarean section. One can allow them to go for a vaginal delivery, but only thing that vaginal delivery should happen within 12 hours of the convulsion. And when if the patient goes into labor, one should be always giving a very good analgesia during labor, because otherwise patient might throw a fit because of the pain. So, one can use opioids or one can go for epidural anesthesia. And during labor, if the patient, one can definitely induce the patient also along with as normally would do with the prostaglandin or with the oxytocin. When the patient delivers, we should always only thing remember that we should do active management of third stage of labor. Ergometrin is contraindicated in this case, okay. And if the patient needs cesarean as I told you, the only indications are the obstetric indication, like if there is a CPD, or if there is a malpresentation, or if there is fetal distress, or there is major degree of placenta, or patient is suppose very early pregnancy and cervix is very unfavorable, you know that this patient is not going to deliver with your induction, then it is better to go for a cesarean. But cesarean, before that we should always start at least one dose of dexamethasone as we do in all preterm patient. Or suppose when you are inducing the patient and she is not progressing well and you know this patient is not going, it will take a very long time, she is having a very slow progress, then you better go for a cesarean section. Then another point may be sometimes the patient is deteriorating, you have induced the labor, you thought she can deliver vaginally, but she is not progressing and the condition is deteriorating, it is better to terminate the pregnancy by cesarean. And for cesarean, one have to remember that always when you give anesthesia, it is the regional anesthesia which is better than the general anesthesia, because in general anesthesia when do intubation, then it might increase the BP, suddenly there might be shoot up of blood pressure, or it might also stimulate a fit. So, it is better to go for a regional anesthesia, but only thing in regional anesthesia you should remember that if the platelet count is less than 50,000, then one should not give any regional anesthesia. Okay. And once the patient has delivered, after that always you should look for observe very carefully, because this kind of patient goes for a postpartum hemorrhage. So, you should observe the patient very carefully. Also sometimes patient might even throw a fit even after delivery. So, at least for 48 hours patient needs to be observed carefully. And as you have discussed before, magnesium sulphate should be continued at least for 24 hours after the delivery.
Ma'am, so the treatment of eclampsia is control of convulsions, control of blood pressure, and the definitive treatment includes delivery of the baby and the placenta. But why are women still dying of eclampsia in our country?
Thanks, Dr. Bindu. This is a very important question, because I also thought about that and did a study on this particular topic. About 4 years back, I have studied maternal mortality in my previous institution. Over a period of 2 years, 33 patients died because of eclampsia. Okay. So, which makes around 21% death is due to eclampsia. And what I have realized after analyzing this death is that about 66.6% of these patients were women below the age of 25. That means, so young people are dying of this particular preventable disease. And another point is that patient out of this 33 patients, only 8 patients has received some amount of treatment outside, not even complete treatment before reaching the tertiary care center. They have to travel a distance of 5 to 170 kilometers. They travel to get treatment in a tertiary care center. And these patients, while coming also, they are not coming in a ALS ambulance with doctor or proper ventilators, but most of the patients are traveling in ordinary private vehicle, or even an auto, or even in an ambulance which are not well equipped with except oxygen. So, patients are dying. I felt, my conclusion was that our patients are dying not because we do not know the treatment, or it is not available, or it is expensive, but because patients are not getting, because it is not available on time, or nobody is giving them proper treatment immediately, which I told in the beginning that patients are dying because of that. When they come to the hospital in such a bad state, they are in a state that they need an intensive care unit monitoring, but that is also not always available to them immediately when they reach a tertiary care center. In India, all the tertiary care centers, especially in government setup, they are so busy or so overcrowded that this patient does not get an ICU bed immediately. So, these are the causes. So, I feel that to prevent this, actually it is most important is the awareness. We should try to prevent this disease, and also there should be some facilities that they should be able to afford, and it should be available near their house, so that they can get this treatment immediately, and we can actually prevent a lot of this unnecessary deaths.
So, ma'am, what is the take home message for the audience?
See, what I told you till now, I want everybody should understand that this is a preventable disease, and it is for that we need the awareness, okay, and also there should be an eclampsia drill should be a mandatory in the training program of all healthcare providers, and there should be some policy decision so that this management of the eclampsia or management of all these kind of acute problem should be available and affordable to the masses near their house.
Today we had with us Dr. Banashri Das. She shared with us her experience and the findings of her research study. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing with us so much about how to manage eclampsia. You have taught us that teamwork and timely referral to a tertiary center will go a long way in reducing the morbidity and mortality due to eclampsia. Thank you.